Hey everyone, my name is Donna and this is Phoenix Fire. Today's live production is brought to you in part by Prairie Sky Recovery Center in Leipzig, Saskatchewan, and Not Lost Clothing. Today's guest, Kelsey Dumont, incredibly busy mother of four, an advocate, and we're going to meet her right after this. I spent a year and a half on the streets. Addiction took me there. Pain took me there. My name is Donna, person in recovery, domestic violence survivor, mother of two. I spent years running from myself, but no more. I've come to find peace, and I am not here to light a candle. I am here to set fire to the darkness and give voice to the voiceless. I hope you'll join me and my guests as we face the stigma around addiction and tear down the walls of oppression. This is not a safe space. This is a brave space. This is Phoenix Fire. Okay, let's bring in Kelsey. Hey, Kelsey.
Hey Donna, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
Good.
Good. Thanks for joining us today. Is
Well, thanks for
there,
having
oh, my pleasure.
me.
Is there anything you'd like to say before we get started?
I don't think so. Just want to send out positive energy to the world every day. So,
That's wonderful. All right, let's go. So, why did you want to come on the show today, Kels?
honestly, I just wanted to come on the show to discuss a little bit more about maybe the particulars behind harm reduction strategies that are available outside of just recovery, and also the benefits of supporting those harm reduction strategies, both from a human perspective, but also from a financial perspective.
That's great. What is your backstory?
All right. So I was adopted at birth into a very wonderful, loving family. So just a little bit about my parents because it does play a role. So my dad grew up in the United States. His dad was so my grandpa was in the Air Force. And so they kind of moved around from army base to army base across the country. Very Republican family, pro Trump. So you can imagine probably how extreme opposite those political views are versus what the many of us are here today. And then my mom grew up, small rural Sask on a farm. So once again, very conservative. Um, so yeah, I grew up in my family. I was the only child. I ended up going to a community school in Regina. And so a lot of my friends were, Indigenous, immigrants, or new to the country. We had a lot of my friends were in foster care or were from a very abusive situation. And so I was saying this to you earlier, Donna, that some of my earliest memories that I have as a child was, standing up and arguing with my Republican parents that, to be mindful of, racist or kind of bigoted opinions, that people are people and it doesn't matter where they came from or what they look like. It's more about their character and their actions. So those were kind of always my early memories. Was just always standing up and fighting for people. From there, so there was a lot of drugs in my elementary school. There were a few pregnancies, not myself. Lots of drugs, lots of abuse. Unfortunately, we had a few of my friends commit suicide in grade 6. So, there was struggles always around me, but I hadn't really been personally affected up until that point. And then I guess it was about 3 weeks after my 14th birthday, and I was sexually assaulted. And so kind of just flipped my world inside out. I just started high school and was still trying to get my feet under me in terms of, my friend group and who I would spend time with. So I think that was really another key pivotal moment in my life. Because like most people, I think, who end up with any form of addictions, a lot of that is rooted in pain and just trying to self-medicate or make that pain go away. So, whatever was offered to me, I took. So, spent a lot of years trying to numb that pain. Once again, with basically anything that was offered to me. So I was heavy into drugs for probably about 4 years. And then I tried to find a way out of it and just basically replaced my drugs with alcohol. Yeah.
And how long have you been clean, sober now?
So the last drug that I've touched was September 5th in 2006. So coming on 16 years.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thanks. Yeah. And, to be honest, I'm so fortunate. I think where I was, we didn't have opioids really available to the folks who are around. So I tell people all the time, I'm so thankful that, the oxys weren't in my circle, because things could have probably looked a little bit different in terms of my outcomes. And also I just had a very supportive family who were there for me. So
I'm very fortunate.
Yeah. So now I'm married. I have 4 kids between the ages of 5 and 11. I have an amazing husband. I'm part-time pharmacist, full-time advocate out in the community. I volunteer largely with a group called Warriors of Hope. So we're on the ground, boots on the ground in Regina here, just trying to advocate for others, whether it's housing, food security, addiction support. Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked quite a bit about all that you do, and you're an incredible woman, Kelsey, I must say. Mother of 4 on top of it, I honestly admire, and I don't know how you manage to do all that you do. Now, in one of our conversations, you mentioned that there were 2 sides, to this issue. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for us?
Yeah. So I think when we're talking about, substance use disorder or the benefits of harm reduction strategies, there's 2 sides that we can talk about. There's the one, which is the human side of it. And that's really focusing on what's best for the individual, meeting them where they're at, not judging anyone, not trying to force my opinion or my beliefs on someone else. But then there's also the second side, and that's the financial side of things. And I hate saying that there's people who that's what they care about. But let's be honest, when you look at the governments and politics, helping folks with substance use disorder or addictions, it's not a sexy political campaign topic.
Right.
So unfortunately, you have to speak financials to them and the cost savings, the financial aspects of supporting folks with addictions or struggling with, houselessness or food insecurity.
And does that relate to the comment you made about the perfect circle?
Um, a little bit, I guess. I always describe to others who don't maybe understand what it's like to be houseless, or to be struggling on the streets. Um, but right now, the way in which people can move forward, it's almost the way that the policies currently are. It's almost impossible. I would say it's like a perfect circle. So in order to, with no entry point. So no matter where these folks are, they're on this perfect circle,
Mm-hmm.
no entry point. And what I mean by that is, in order to get housing, you need to have money. So in order to get money, if you're not in a place right now to have that full-time corporate Monday to Friday 9 to 5 job, you can look at SIS or SED, so your social assistance or income plan. But in order to get on social assistance, you need to have ID.
Mm-hmm.
In order to get ID, you need to have ID.
Mm-hmm.
You can throw in all the different topics, like in order to get and stay on social assistance, you need to have a bank account.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, to get a bank account, you need your ID. Sometimes to get in, maybe you have social assistance and maybe you have your ID. But in order to get into housing, a lot of housing locations, especially transitional housing, even shelters, you're supposed to be sober.
Yeah.
How do you stop your addictions? How do you manage that if you're houseless?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so
Yeah.
it's just, you can't.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these programs, we are helping one of the woman on this fall who was houseless, and she just had a baby. She was like 5 hours postpartum, and she was homeless, and she was actually, the only place she had to go back was a tent that we had set up in a park, and it was November 8th, so minus 11, dipping down to minus 20 at night. And they could offer her one night hotel after we advocated for it.
Mm-hmm.
They could get her clothing donations if she had an address.
Right.
Well, she doesn't have an address.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't qualify to receive a few pairs of underwear, pants, and a shirt.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so difficult to rise up from your current situation.
Absolutely, it is.
Current,
And sorry
with
to cut you off, but I mean, I personally experienced that perfect circle in many, many ways, and so many times, and it's next to impossible to get out. I mean, I was more fortunate than that last lady that you were talking about, in that when I was pregnant, suddenly services became available to me. But I had, there was a big uphill battle to get out of that circle still, because I didn't have ID, couldn't get the bank account, couldn't cash my checks. So I can understand exactly what you're talking about. And times I found myself sometimes educating people downtown about those sorts of issues, because they were like, well, why don't you just do this, and why don't you just do that? So
yeah, why don't you just?
Yeah. So
yeah.
Going to move along to talk about, like, why is harm reduction so important? And I know we talk about this type of issue quite frequently, but I don't think this is an issue that could be flogged to death, really. I think we need to keep bringing it up and keep clarifying and expand on those thoughts. So, and you're a great person to do that. So please.
Thanks, Donna. So when we talk about harm reduction strategies, I just want to quickly go through the different strategies, because some of them are probably ones that we talk about over and over and over again. But there's also some other harm reduction strategies that are maybe not as well known, or maybe not as well discussed. So even just having education around safer sex, safer drug use, just because someone has been injecting drugs for, whether it's 1 month, 10 years, Um, doesn't necessarily mean that they've been like, how many people have the opportunity to talk to a professional about how you safely inject drugs?
Yeah.
The first time that you inject, your heroin, your hydromorph, your fentanyl, crystal meth, whatever your choice is, you're sitting in a either a back alley or a basement or a friend's house or wherever. You're not, speaking to a professional in terms of how to safely inject.
Absolutely not. You're usually relying on the people around you to guide you on that.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so I know that seems silly, but even when you chat with folks that I've worked with, but also, you can call up Insight, which is the safer consumption site in Vancouver. They've been in operation since 1999. So there's so much good information coming out of Vancouver. And clients have actually, 75% of clients who have accessed the safe consumption site at Insight have reported that they've actually had changes in their injection drug use just from having access to a safe person who can be like, hey, if you do this, you're more likely to actually hit the vein versus, damaging the tissue around. Or these are the good sites or the safer sites to try to inject in first before going to places like your neck, your groin, what have you. So just having that safer, how to do it safely can prevent things like wound infections, soft skin and tissue infections. Obviously, the more damage we do to the tissues around, more likely to cause more harm.
Right.
That education also comes with, if you have access to a safe consumption site, try to use that. Here's places where you can access cleaner, safer supplies. So even that education, it seems so simple, but I don't think we do a very good job of accessing the right folks. Obviously, oh, yeah. Sorry, Donna, anything else to add on?
No, I just wanted to say that I agree completely. When I was, I don't know, I don't want to use like the wrong language, but when I was out there, it was very much figure it out for yourself and hope things don't go wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
And then if they do, you're terrified to go to the hospital or seek medical attention because you know exactly what you're going to be faced with, right? So it's a bad situation.
Once again, vicious circle, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
The safe consumption sites I want to come back to because I feel like I just have some more information. So I'm going to come back to that one, as well as the decriminalization and safer drug supply. So those three are kind of like the big topics and that we hear more about. So once again, I have a lot to say about those three. So I'll be right back to those. The opioid agonist therapy, so OAT, those are our methadone, our Suboxone, either a long-acting morphine or hydromorphone. I think most people are at least somewhat familiar with those programs. There's a lot of stigma in society that aren't in this world. You always hear these flippant comments, someone's on methadone program, supposed to help them get off opioids, but then they're on it for life.
Yeah.
Okay, but so what?
Yeah.
Truly, so what? If you're on, a methadone, Suboxone, long-acting morphine, you're reducing the amount of dope sickness. And by reducing that, you're not as desperate for that next hit. You're more likely to be safer when you're using. So you're less likely, to do the back alley, sharing a needle, not knowing what you're slamming. You're making smarter decisions because you're not experiencing that dope sickness. So even if someone is still on a methadone, Suboxone program, even if they're still using, we know that people are making smarter choices. And by doing that, you're reducing harm.
Right.
There's a ton of evidence out there that show people who are on those programs, once again, between a 70 to 75% have changes in their injecting behaviors. So they're less likely to inject, less frequently to inject if they still are injecting. So, maybe they're only slamming 3 times a day versus 7 times a day. A lot of folks over time as well stop injecting altogether. Maybe they're just inhaling or snorting, which once again, perfect world, no one has addictions. Nobody has trauma. No one has pain that they have to self-medicate with. Unfortunately, this isn't a perfect world, and people still have to manage that trauma. Some are fortunate enough that they have other supports in place, or that they don't go down the path to addictions, but unfortunately it's a reality. So instead of ignoring it, let's do what's best. Well, let's do what the evidence shows is best. So if I can help support or change the stigma around programs like methadone or Suboxone, to say, hey, you know what? Who cares if they're on methadone for life? If that means that they're not injecting drugs anymore, they're only smoking. That's amazing, right?
Yeah, I agree completely. How do you feel about, like, just talking about a little bit about my personal experience? I was on methadone for some time, and I had used a little bit of meth, and I went for my urine test, and it came up dirty, and they pretty much were ready to cut me off,
Yep.
So has that changed at all, or is that still kind of the...
That's tough to answer, because I'm hoping that the more we have these conversations, the more this hits the media, this hits the news, which it has, unfortunately, because of the overdose crisis that's going on, both in Canada and the US. We're forcing people to sit down and listen. That I'm sure there's some practitioners, and certainly there's some that I've worked with, that if we see that folks are still using, or they report to us, it's helping, but the dope sickness is still coming in at 18 hours. Instead of cutting people off, that's where we have that conversation of, do we need to increase your dose? Is the dose that we're giving you not enough, right? And that's the conversations that we should be having, instead of, oh, I see that you still have some methamphetamines in your urine drug screen. We're cutting you off the program. Like, that's doing the opposite, right? We're not helping people. We're judging people. We're belittling people. You don't want to go get your urine drug screen. So then you start lying and making up excuses so that you can delay it another week, so that hopefully by next week, okay, I'm gonna try going 2 days without, so that I can get a clean screen, can get my prescription renewed.
Yep.
And once again, you're starting down a vicious cycle, and it's not benefiting. It's not doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
But that being said, I'm sure there's still a ton of practitioners out there with that same mentality, that kind of all or none.
Yep.
And it really needs to come back to, being a healthcare provider or healthcare professional, whatever disease stage or condition we're trying to treat, whether it's high blood pressure, diabetes, what have you. We always try to come up with goals of therapy. So say if somebody has diabetes and high blood pressure and high cholesterol, my goal of therapy is to prevent the major side effects that could happen from those disease states.
Mm-hmm.
So the ultimate goal would be, to prevent a heart attack. Someone with those three, blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, is at a really high risk of having a heart attack.
Absolutely. But
So,
you don't expect them to stop eating burgers or you're going to cut them off their medication.
right. And so my goals of therapy, so I'm going to prescribe you medication, because that's what my goal of therapy is.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have that conversation where you educate the patient. This is why I'm prescribing you. Do my goals of therapy align with yours?
Mm-hmm.
We need to take that we do that for every disease state or condition,
mm-hmm.
except substance use disorder. So my goals of therapy, once again, in a perfect world, is that if I prescribe you methadone or Suboxone, you wouldn't use anymore. We can get you off any substances. We can get you into a house. You can, get your kids back, or you can eventually work up to having a job. That's a perfect world. But that's my goals of therapy, sitting in my office and living quite a privileged life at this point in time. My goals of therapy needs to align with yours. And if your goal of therapy is, you know what, I'm in a really bad place right now and I want things to get better. I don't know how to get there. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to try, right? So if your goal of therapy is to prevent dope sickness and maybe use a little bit safer, maybe cut back on injections, or maybe because you're not as dope sick, you don't have to use someone's needles. Mm-hmm. Then that's your goals of therapy, and I need to realign mine with yours, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes perfect sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
so
it made perfect
I think
sense to the government, but apparently we're not.
I know
we're not quite there yet.
Yeah,
I hope I
know.
didn't say something I'm going to get in trouble for there, but I have some
and just so
you
all know, I'm
that.
not a prescriber. I'm not a prescriber. I'm not a doctor. But I'm just speaking in like the general context of what, mm-hmm. At least in my opinion, is what we should be doing. Mm-hmm. And then once again, that goes back to education. That first comment that I made, we need to educate society. We need to educate our healthcare providers, mm-hmm. Right in school, right in university. Mm-hmm. The reality is, even 5, 10, 15 years ago, it was taboo to talk about cigarette smoking with your mm-hmm. clients. I remember when I first started as a pharmacist, it was really, really, really taboo to ask your clients if they smoke cigarettes. Oh. And now we just, somebody comes into your nurse's office or your physician's office or the hospital or wherever, and you say, do you smoke? How many cigarettes a day do you smoke? Do you want help? Do you want a nicotine patch or Nicorette gum? If you're here in the hospital, we'd prefer if you don't go down to smoke, but can we help you with your cravings, right? Mm-hmm. We need to get there with substance use disorder. Absolutely. We need to get there for folks who either, whatever their drug of choice is, what mm-hmm. do you use? And this is why I want to know. I don't want to know because I'm judging you. I want to know so I can help you. Mm-hmm. And we need to train our professionals right in university, so that when they are out in practice, social workers, anyone, when they're out in practice, they can have those meaningful conversations to meet what the client needs, not what they need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. Other things. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. No, you go ahead. I apologize.
No. I could talk about this for hours and hours.
I'd love to talk with you for hours and hours. You're just a wealth of information. It's amazing.
Oh, thank you. Other things that we can do, housing first, once again, I've already said, you can't expect someone to just upright stop using substances if they don't have a safe place to sleep. Mm-hmm. I think of where we live in Saskatchewan here, -50 winters. Mm-hmm. no one can survive outside. So what do? You either kick in shed doors or garage doors, face potential, arrest.
Mhm.
You're engaging in crime in the neighborhood, and it's for survival, right?
Mhm.
Um, you People have to engage in sex work. They seek out gang involvement. And it's all about survival, right?
Mhm.
Um, if I know that I wouldn't want to live on the streets and have to find a way to survive sober,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So we really need to focus on housing first. And there's a lot of shelters, a lot of transitional houses where you get caught smoking a joint, like a marijuana joint, and kick you out.
Mhm.
uh, or you're having behavior issues because you're going through withdrawal, you're out. And it's just like, how do we expect people to get to a safe place if they don't have a safe roof over their head? So housing first programs, and really changing policy in um, creating safe places, even if someone is still using,
Mhm.
is going to help them move along in the path towards, safer consumption. Um, just will help, I think, their overall well-being.
Mhm. I agree completely. That's one of the barriers that I faced. Ultimately resulted in my ending up on the streets is because I was in active use and I couldn't get into any shelters in Saskatoon because they wanted a certificate that I'd been through a program, and it was just too much to come
Mm-hmm.
together in a short period of time, and so yeah, I fell through the cracks. So
Yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly with everything that you say, Kelsey.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of these programs too, you need to be sober to access these programs.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of I know a lot of the programs where there's different programs in the community that help you. They can teach like different adulting skills, so how to do laundry, how to cook, how to clean. The family programs, to help for reunification with your children.
Mhm.
um, all of those programs, you have to be clean and sober, which I hate those words, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, but so it's like, I need to I've never been in a situation, I've never had a healthy relationship um with any adult, even as a child. I don't know how to do those basic life skills of how to pay bills or how to do my laundry. And I know in order to get a house, I need to do these programs, but I can't do them if I'm still using. And once
Mhm.
again, it goes back to that perfect circle where there's no entry point. You need the prerequisite beforehand, but there's nowhere to enter, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Makes 100% sense. Excuse me. So let's back when I talked to Marie Adrides, you came up with some pretty amazing numbers. So I'd like to
Mm-hmm.
delve into that a little bit if we can. Okay. Uh,
Yeah. So, oh,
you go ahead. You're the knowledge keeper here.
sorry, Donna.
No, it's all good. Don't
Anyone
apologize.
who knows me, I can just talk all the time. So yeah, so then that goes into the benefits of safe consumption sites.
Mhm.
So, so once again, this plays into those like human supporting individual side of the harm reduction strategies, which by the way is what I wish everyone needed for convincing. But unfortunately, we also need some of those hard numbers, especially when we're talking to like politicians and
Mhm.
policymakers.
Yep.
So safe consumption sites. We have Prairie Harm Reduction up in Saskatoon, and we have one here in Regina at the New Yotina Friendship Center. But the main one is Insight in Vancouver, where we have a lot of data coming out. And when I say that, both the Friendship Center in Regina here and Prairie Harm, they put out monthly reports. So they are putting out that data. Super interesting. You guys should check it out. I know Prairie Harm Reduction posts them on their Facebook page every month. So definitely worth looking at. But when I'm talking about like hard studies that the medical community looks at, we have that data available through Insight because they have been up and running since 98. They were the first consumption site in North America. And so just some of the data and numbers coming out of there that just show the benefit of safe consumption sites. So I've already mentioned accessing safe consumption sites. Once again, about 75% of clients report a change in their injecting behaviors since starting to go to that safe consumption site. So whether that is safer injection, so injecting with safer supply, so clean rigs, using, clean sterile water, pipes, cookers, what have you, using safer locations on your body to inject, also reducing the number of times that folks inject daily. About 25% actually stop injecting completely since accessing services there. The other interesting piece with safe consumption sites, oftentimes they also have other supports available for them. So they have access to housing, a housing advocate and support worker. They have access to an addictions counselor. They have access to refer to either detox or a treatment plan. They have peer mentors. The list of supports that they have access to in the building is like the true wraparound services that most folks, not everybody needs every support, but the fact that they're available there really shows you can see the value in that in the numbers that come out. So same thing out of Insight, they show about 55% people enter addiction treatment when they're accessing their supports. Prairie Harm Reduction, once again, if you look at their monthly reports, they list how many people have been referred to housing. So it's usually about 5 to 10 a month. How many people they access medical support. So, someone comes into a safe consumption site and they have a wound, which is very common, especially if they've been injecting. And so they have access to personnel on site where they feel safe and respected, so they can access that treatment. Reduction of public injecting. So about 70% fewer public injections, less likely to have unsafe needle being disposed in the community. Insight, they did a 10-year data collection and analysis. And so in 10 years, they saved just the medical system almost $20 million.
Wow, that's staggering.
In cost saving. Yeah. And that's just in medical. So that's not, counting, especially when you look at justice. So, crime goes down, you have less people who are, engaging in criminal behavior. And then also in that 10-year data analysis, they showed almost 1,200 life years saved. So 1,200 years where someone was still alive than if they hadn't accessed that safe consumption site.
That's incredible.
Pretty staggering.
Absolutely.
In the entire world, there has been 0 fatal overdoses at safe consumption sites.
I recently saw that statistic myself. That's amazing and should be paid more attention to.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
In terms of like Hep C, you had mentioned that
Hmm.
uh, you are aware of the figures that it costs to treat Hep
Hmm.
C.
Yeah, so for hepatitis C, we know about 80% of the cases of hepatitis C come from injection drug use. Um, the data is a little bit harder to track because we can now cure Hep C, which
Yes,
is super exciting.
thank goodness.
Um, but that being said, we can cure someone of hepatitis C, and if they continue to either engage in unsafe sex practices or sharing of drug equipment, um, they can be reinfected with hepatitis C.
Right.
And then they would have to re-engage in care.
Mhm.
But for an 8 to 12 week, depending on the individual's needs, the treatment now that to cure hepatitis C is about $100,000 for each treatment.
Wow.
So once again, that's $100,000 in our healthcare costs for one diagnosis.
Hmm.
With HIV, we have once again we have really great medications now. HIV is no longer what it used to be.
Hmm.
We can basically give you one pill once a day, put HIV kind of into sleep mode. But it's still, the medications are still extremely expensive. You still have follow-up appointments, blood work, what have you, that need to be.
How much if how much is
Yeah.
the medication for HIV for like one
So
individual?
yeah, so it varies depending on which regimen, but you're looking at least about it's on average $1,000 a month.
Oof.
Um, if you're on a more complex regimen, it can, be up to about $1,700 a month.
Oh my
So
goodness.
they say one lifetime for an HIV positive case is about $1.4 million per year in Canada. Or
Okay.
sorry, per lifetime in Canada.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, is any of that covered under Sask Health, or is all of that covered depending on your financial situation?
So in Saskatchewan, and if you have an active Saskatchewan health card,
Hmm.
or if you're covered through NIHB, so Indian Affairs, um, your hepatitis C and your HIV medications are covered
Okay.
at full cost.
Okay.
Also, just going to put a plug in there that there's actually a medication that you can take. So it's a one tablet once a day that you can take to prevent HIV.
Oh, I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
That's
So
incredible.
if you're, and I hate once again saying the word increased risk.
Hmm.
If you are engaging in sexual activity or using any sort of substances, so you could be a 17-year-old kid or a 23-year-old person. If you're having sex with somebody, why not take a pill once a
Hmm.
day to prevent potential HIV transmission, right?
Absolutely.
Um, so it's something that not a lot of people are aware of.
Mhm.
Um, so it's covered for free in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is very unique. We're the only place in the entire world that our HIV cases are led by injection drug use.
Okay.
So over the last 2 decades, about 70 to 80% of all of our HIV cases are related to injection drug use.
Mm.
So when you think of our HIV, um, obviously it's like I just said, it's almost $1.4 million per HIV case to our healthcare system. That alone should be enough to convince the government, hey, if we have full access to safer supplies
Mhm.
at 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in every single community, no questions asked, people can have access to cleaner supplies. In Saskatchewan, that's 80% of our HIV cases. That's
Right.
80% of hepatitis C cases,
Hmm.
right? And while our medications are really, really great, um, for curing Hep C or kind of putting that HIV virus into sleep mode,
Hmm.
So then we can't transmit it to other people. It goes back to, if I am living on the streets, I don't have a safe home, I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight, it's -50, I don't know how I'm going to get my next meal, I'm dope sick,
Mm-hmm.
I am being forced into sex work to pay for my drugs to prevent my dope sickness, and then maybe then I can figure out where I can sleep tonight. The idea of me trying to convince you to take one tablet once a day to put that HIV into sleep mode so that you can stay healthy and prevent an AIDS defying illness in 10 to 20 years. Like,
Yeah.
It's not what you're worried about today. What's going to happen to you in 20 years? You don't even know if you're going to be okay tonight, right?
Yep.
So that's why all those other strategies like housing first is so important.
Mm-hmm. I agree. In our conversation, you had mentioned there's a problem with treatment.
It's one, yeah, like it's one of those things where it's one of those conversations where sometimes people don't want to hear it. But we're on Phoenix Fire, so apparently I can say whatever I want.
Fire away.
Fire away. Treatment is a really great option and it works for some people. And so I would never tell someone that I wouldn't want them to become clean or sober. But it doesn't work for everyone. Or maybe today it's not the right option. It might work in the future for you, but everybody's recovery looks different. And I know you folks, like you yourself, Donna, and also Daniel on Hard Knocks, you can't fully recover if you're dead, right? But society puts so much pressure that treatment is the savior. As long as we can get you into treatment, you'll be fine, and our problems are put away. We're not, our current government in Saskatchewan does not fund our safe consumption sites, even though that's where all the data lies. But instead, they put the majority of their budget into opening up 12 new treatment beds. They can pat themselves on the back. Perfect. But a lot of our...
Sorry, could I interject for just a quick moment, Kelsey? I just want to clarify that the discussion of treatment and the problem with that, we're talking about publicly funded treatment, not private.
Yes.
Okay.
Publicly funded, yes. And once again, treatment, in a perfect world, we could all go to treatment and come out, and we've addressed our mental health issues, we've addressed, our housing, we've addressed our substance use, and our life has changed. That's a perfect world. Reality is we're not in a perfect world. Our publicly funded treatment options, some of them you need to go to detox first. Well, we know there's a wait list for detox. Sometimes we can go to detox, but then there's a 5-day wait after you leave detox before you can get into treatment. Well, what's that person going to do for those 5 days in between? There's, right. In each site, sometimes, there's only 10 beds, depending on where you live. Lots of communities don't even have a treatment facility. And those beds are often 28 days. Well, we know that 28 days isn't long enough to address all of our global needs. Why were we using substances to begin with? We were coping with pain. We're coping with trauma. We have PTSD. We have undiagnosed mental health issues. Not to mention at 28 days, you're just barely on the other side of your detox dope sickness, right? So then people are kicked back out, but the rest of the world hasn't changed. They don't have a housing. You can't get onto SIS. You can't get onto social assistance in under 28 days. If you qualify for SED, so your disability, right now there's about a 6-month wait to get payment. But how do you pay for rent if you don't have money coming in? You can't get ID that's likely been stolen or discontinued or put on hold. You can't get ID in 28 days.
Right.
So then I've gone through the treatment, even if I've been successful, when the doors close, where do I go?
Right.
Most people end up back in a similar location. They're either houseless, they're in a shelter, they're still in the same city or location, they're still surrounded by the same toxic relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when you actually look at the hard numbers, going through treatment and maintaining sobriety, it only works for about 14 to 20% of the population.
Well,
So
and there's a
once
severe
again,
lack of like aftercare itself.
exactly. Yeah.
Aside from the,
And so
the perfect circle issues, there's that whole issue of aftercare is non-existent, except for
exactly.
in some of the private ones, but
And I was
publicly,
gonna say exactly. And
you're on your own.
unfortunately, a lot of folks can't afford the public beds. You know, when we maybe only have, I don't know what the number is, how many public beds we have. It's actually very difficult to find.
Mm-hmm.
But if we only have 100 public beds in the entire province, and we have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of folks who are still struggling,
Mm-hmm.
once again, the government patting themselves on the back because they've put $40 million into opening 12 new beds for the year,
Yep.
but then won't fund our safe consumption sites,
Mm-hmm.
where we actually have the evidence, where we actually engage people in housing and in treatment and in safer use.
Mm-hmm.
And we save lives. We reduce HIV, Hep C. We reduce ER visits and hospital admissions by 50%,
Mm-hmm.
simply by having access to a safe consumption site. And not to mention all the overdoses that we prevent, right?
Right. Yep. And even the funds that are utilized for emergency response vehicles in the
Yeah,
community, like that
absolutely.
alone is a staggering budget. So
Absolutely. And um, accessing treatment, so accessing healthcare treatment for substance use disorder is the only condition, the only disease, the only health condition that when you access treatment, you're actually at an increased risk of dying.
mm-hmm. I remember you talking about this before. Now, why is that?
So you access treatment. A lot of our treatment is abstinence based.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, we go through this detox. So either you go into detox and you're out, you got to wait, 5 days a week. So you've now detoxed for 5 days. Or even if you go into a 28-day treatment,
Mm-hmm.
but once again, like I talked about, you go back to the same situation. There's no wraparound services. There's no support afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And your tolerance to substances, especially opioids or fentanyl, hydromorph, morphine, what have you, oxys that are out on the streets, you haven't used in 5 days or you haven't used in 20 days.
Mm-hmm.
If you relapse, you're at like a 10 times higher risk of having a fatal overdose
Mm-hmm.
than if you hadn't gone to treatment, because you still have that drug on board. Same thing with our folks when they're incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
The doors open, they're released, they walk out.
Yep.
And they haven't used, maybe they have. Sometimes you can access that in jail, sometimes you can't.
Yep.
If you do, it's not consistent.
Mm-hmm.
So same thing, your tolerance is down. I can't speak for every corrections, every penitentiary. The stories that are coming out of Regina's corrections and Pine Grove, for example, as well as Saskatoon corrections. So basically Saskatchewan, folks aren't released with a bunch of Narcan.
Mm-hmm.
They're just released and they're out the doors.
Right back into the community or whatever.
Right back into the community.
Yeah.
And what's on the streets now is a lot different than what it was even, 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's, at least in Regina, it's all fentanyl. Mm-hmm. And so you're at such a high risk of overdosing and dying.
Yeah, you definitely are. Um,
Mhm.
I just wanted to, because we had talked about the benefits of safe supply, and unfortunately, we
Mhm.
don't have a lot of time to actually get
Yeah.
into detail about that. But I know in some places that like some posts I've seen on that topic, there's been a lot of concern voiced about the safe supply will just end up on the street. So what's the point, really? So what would you say to that?
I'd say who fucking cares? Right?
Good.
Who
Yes.
cares?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the first time I swore today. But truly, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
If if a safer supply is prescribed to a client, and even if it's diverted, even if they turn around and sell it to the street, it's still a safe supply. It's
Absolutely.
not it's not dirty, it's not
Mm-hmm.
laced with benzos, it's not laced with fentanyl, it's not laced with all the other garbage that you use to make in your bathtub.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a safe supply, and I'd rather that be on the streets than the garbage that's going around right now that's killing everyone,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So best case scenario, it's used by the individual that it's prescribed for, which once again would benefit that individual.
Mm-hmm.
Worst case scenario, it's on the streets. It's still safer than what's currently being sold.
Yep.
So once again, we could, I know we're tight for time, but we could honestly have another hour discussion just on decriminalization and safer supply.
Mm-hmm. I agree. We'll have to have you on again, Kelsey. So I think because we're so crunched for time, we're going to shift gears
Yeah.
really quickly here and have a look at some of the comments that have been coming in. Okay, and our first comment is coming in from Hannah Schneider. I'll go purposely get a prescription to make sure it does get on the streets to keep people safe. I like your thinking, Hannah.
I professionally can't condone that.
And another comment from Hannah says it's been said around 400 public funded treatment beds, which was
Oh,
reduced to
thanks, Hannah.
half capacity during the pandemic. I always wonder where exactly are these 400 beds? That's an excellent question.
I spent probably an hour and a half and called a few friends who work in housing or in shelters to try to find that, and I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And next comment coming in is from Andrea. She says recovery is one big puzzle and treatment can be seen as one piece and isn't part
Mm-hmm.
of everyone's puzzle. Our government equates treatment to recovery.
It does. And the policies in place are also specifically for treatment and abstinence base.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Our next comment comes in from Darren. Not sure what this one's in response to, but he does say that one is difficult. When I'm working with a house of clients and somebody actively uses in housing, it is a risk to others. After an attempt to understand and provide an opportunity for positive change, I sometimes have to make the choice to remove people from the housing based on the risks. I'm sorry, we lost the bottom portion of that comment, but I think you understand
Yeah.
where he's going with
Yeah,
that.
it is. It's, if this was a simple, I was going to say simple fix. um but if it was a simple solution, we wouldn't have this podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very complicated, nuanced situation. Andrea says recovery. Oops, I'm sorry, I already put that one up on the screen.
It's my fault. I didn't teach her how to take them out of the queue after.
Daniel's the only one. Daniel's the only one who knows how to work the computer.
Well, I said don't put buttons near me because I will mess things up. Darren says, I haven't been on MAT in over 20 months now. But yes, therapy goals. Harm reduction doesn't have the support or understanding it needs. Sometimes the people we work with just don't want to be ill or homeless. Mhm.
I don't think anybody wants to be sick or
Mhm.
homeless or, nobody actually wants this.
No.
No.
And Hannah says people who access syringe services are 5 times more likely to enter drug treatment and 3 times more likely to stop using than those who don't use these programs.
Mm-hmm.
Hannah's got a lot of great information and statistics here.
Yeah.
Do I sense another guest?
Yes. Same thing. That's the thing. I think that for all of us advocates, that's why it's so frustrating, because we
Mhm.
have all of this evidence. And
Mhm.
I'm talking like almost 25 years worth of Canadian data
Right.
to say, like, you guys, safer supplies, safe consumption site, safer drug supply, housing. Like, we have the evidence that shows we can help people.
Mhm.
And is it going to be perfect? Maybe not. But once again, you can't ever recover if you're dead.
Mhm.
We have all of this data, and it's still like a century worth of prohibition.
Mhm.
And look where we are.
Right.
We have the numbers, we have the data. Hannah and I could probably spew numbers all day. Why are the policymakers, why are the government not looking at the hard numbers? Even if you don't care about the humans, which I do, most of us do, even if you don't care about the humans, which you should, they're your citizens.
Yeah.
But the numbers show like what needs to be done.
Yes.
I know.
Agreed.
Sorry, passionate here.
No, it's very frustrating. I love to see your passion because
Yeah.
I think it echoes a lot throughout this community.
Yeah.
So Lisa says that she was on methadone for 3 years, and without it, she probably wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now you're somewhere where you can access internet and you're
Mhm.
able to listen in and provide that comment. I'm so thankful that you're here, Lisa. Thank you for sharing.
Denise says there needs to be more access, supports, and information in smaller communities as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Darren says, today, in my experience, they do not remove people in MAC clinics for using. They may reduce the amount or suspend a dose for a day in Baltimore.
Which, once again, suspend a dose.
Mhm.
Then people are they're dope sick, and now they're
right.
methadone sick.
Mhm.
What's that going to do? It's going to drive up them using. Maybe, once again, their tolerance is reduced. Maybe they're now seeking out, they need more. So they're doing those back alley drug deals with a dealer that they don't know.
Mhm.
They're slamming with somebody's used supplies. So once again, even reducing the dose or suspending, you're inevitably more likely to cause harm
Mhm.
than supporting the individual.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. I don't think there's much that you say that I disagree with, Kelsey, but Andrea says, sadly, we are great at keeping people stuck in that circle, and we put unrealistic expectations on individuals to claw their way out. This frustrates me so very much. Anyone who gets out or attempts to get out has strength and resilience like I have never known.
Yeah. And
Great words, Andrea.
It truly makes you wonder if the policymakers are intentionally keeping people down. And I hate saying that because I can't imagine why anyone would want to cause harm.
Mhm.
But when the policies are so horribly wrong, it's hard to not wonder that,
Especially when they keep ignoring the data right at their fingertips. But that's another show.
That's a whole nother show.
That's a whole other probably 10 shows, but I'm going to, we're going to move on to letting you go for the day. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with?
So much. Just care about each other, continue to advocate. If you're struggling yourself, I love this platform. I love the Hard Knocks community. There's just so much love and support out there. So try to focus on the good. Find your advocates who can go with you down to social services and force them to listen. Educate yourself so that you can help others. I mean, we're all not perfect. There's still lots of things that I need to learn. This is just the area that I'm passionate about. But educate yourself so you can help others. If you like my sweater, check out notlost.ca. They have a harm reduction line.
And there's a link in the description.
There's a link in the description. And okay, check out the back of my sweater.
Okay. Wow.
It has all the instructions, like the box. Sorry, I'm going to get in trouble, you guys, for going AWOL here. But it has all the information from the Narcan box on it. 15% of their proceeds go to the Saskatchewan Overdose Awareness Group. So find your local people in the community that are supporting local, that are supporting communities.
I agree 100%, Kelsey. Thank you so much for all your time and sharing your knowledge. It was really an honor to have you here.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for listening in, everyone. Thanks for all the comments.
I pushed the button too soon, sorry.
There is power in numbers. If you'd like to contribute to ending the stigma around emotional pain, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow on Twitch, Facebook, and Instagram. Like and comment your thoughts on our posts. Let us come together with our lived and living experience as a resource that has the power to engage new thought processes, to promote new ideas, to broaden the spectrum of care, and to show the world that we can recover. There is a safer way, and we're here to show you how. Have a good one, guys.